Good afternoon, and welcome to the COVID-19 webinar series brought to you by the Jakarta Post and Tenggara Strategics. This webinar is also supported by the COVID-19 Response Acceleration Task Force. My name is Keisha, a researcher from Tenggara Strategics, and I will be guiding you for the next 1.5 hours. So today's webinar is titled Empowering and Supporting Vulnerable Communities During the Pandemic, and is going to discuss how the pandemic has surely affected all walks of society, most especially vulnerable groups such as migrants and refugees. So there are many communities who still lack basic human needs, from food to shelter and a means of income, and are thus greatly susceptible to the impacts of this pandemic. Not to mention that these communities are often in difficult situations where they're unable to easily access proper healthcare and government aid. And so this webinar will then focus on how we can support and empower vulnerable communities. So today we have with us two wonderful speakers who will share their experiences in supporting vulnerable communities during the COVID-19 pandemic. But before we get to know more about the speakers, I would like to remind everyone to continue implementing their health protocols. Remember to wear your masks, wash your hands with soap and running water, and maintain a safe physical distance from others. Now, I would like to first introduce our first speaker for today. We have Dio Vio Alfat. Hi, Dio. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Dio is
You're
the
welcome.
founder.
Thank you for having me.
Dio is the founder of Sandia Institute for Peace and Human Rights. He is an expert contributor um, at the World Bank's research for measuring discriminatory legislation in Indonesia, and is also the awardee of the US Department of State's Global Emerging Young Leaders for 2020. In terms of his own human rights advocacy, he was also honored with the same award in 2018, which is very impressive. Now, for our second speaker today, we have Tamara Dewi Gondo Surijo. Hi, Tamara, how are you?
Hey, good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us as well. Tamara's passions lie in seeking justice for all, regardless of race, background, and gender. Her experiences are found in the intersection of corporations and nonprofits as vice president of Permias Nasional, partnership manager at Digital Raya Google for Startup, and as director of the nonprofit Second Chance Initiative, which focuses on education for marginalized children. She also consulted for INGOs and social projects in Indonesia for refugee groups, disaster relief, as well as rural community development. Currently, she is the CEO of Liberty Society, a fashion social enterprise providing training and safe access to livelihoods for refugee women. Now, I'm sure we're all very excited to hear from the experiences of both these speakers. But before I hand the screen over to them, I'll go over a few rules that we have for this webinar. Firstly, to ensure that the webinar runs smoothly, all participants' videos will be switched off and audio automatically muted for the entirety of the event. Secondly, should anyone have any questions, you can submit them through the Q&A box. And please be reminded that if you have a question for a specific speaker, do include the name of the speaker you'd like to address. Questions will be answered during the Q&A session later on after the two speakers have presented. And thirdly, for those of you who are interested in receiving an e-certificate for participating in this webinar, please remember to fill out the post-event survey that will be given out to you after this webinar. So only those who fill out the survey will be able to receive an e-certificate. So just one last thing before we begin, I'd like to invite Dio and Tamara for a quick photo. Is the IT team ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. All right, one more time. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Now, without further ado, the screen is yours, Dio.
All right, thank you, Keisha. Can we show the presentation now? All right, thank you everyone for coming to today's webinar. My name is Diopi Alfat. I'm the founder of Stanley Institute for Peace and Human Rights. And I'm very thankful for Jakarta Post Tenggara Strategic for conducting this event today. I think it's very important for us to understand more about the problems that vulnerable communities are facing, especially during the pandemic. So today's event, today's webinar, we will talk about the vulnerable communities in a pandemic. I think we can proceed to the next slide for now. So before understanding the problems that they are facing at this moment, we will first talk about the definition of vulnerable communities. So in accordance with the Human Rights Law number 59, year 1999, in the explanation of Article 5.3, the vulnerable communities are defined as follows. First, senior citizens. Second, children. Third, economically disadvantaged groups. Fourth, pregnant women. And the last one is disabled individuals, differently abled individuals. So there is another definition set by Human Rights Panel. We can move on to the next slide, please. So in accordance with the Human Rights Reference, I cited this definition from Mr. Iskandar Hussein, who is also an expert on human rights. He defines that vulnerable communities fall under the category of first, refugees, second, internally displaced persons, third, national minorities, fourth, migrant workers. The next one is indigenous communities, children, and women. There is also another definition set by Human Rights Action Plan. It is combining the first and second definition. So this one is more comprehensive. So the category of vulnerable communities fall under first, refugee, second, internally displaced person, third, national minority, fourth, migrant workers, fourth, the next one is indigenous communities, children, women, senior citizens, and economically disadvantaged communities. So the vulnerable communities that we're going to talk today are under the category of above mentioned. So the next one is I'll talk about how this pandemic has exacerbated the lack of vulnerable communities in Indonesia. So even before the pandemic, these vulnerable communities have faced stigma and stereotypes because of their different identities. And this pandemic has exacerbated the stigma against them, especially in groups where they are considered as not in accordance with social norms. We can talk about refugees and asylum seekers, in which they are faced with xenophobic sentiments. We can talk about sexual and gender minorities who have been considered as not in accordance with the social norms. We also talk about the children in here who have been who have often left behind in the discussion of the COVID-19 pandemic response. So with this stigma and stereotypes, I think that the situation has been worsening for them, especially in times of them accessing basic needs. So the condition is also worsened by the fact that we're currently under economic hardships. We have many businesses closed. We have many employees being fired because of the problems with economic development amidst pandemic. And this has worsened the situation for vulnerable communities because they have lost their source of income. The next one is, as I've informed you before, difficulties in accessing healthcare because they have been considered as secondary citizens and not prioritized in the COVID-19 pandemic response. They have difficulties in accessing healthcare in Indonesia. The next one, because of the problems that I've mentioned before, can we go back to the previous slide, please? It's not finished yet. With the problems that I've explained before, they are facing with deteriorating mental health conditions. So there are examples in which they have committed suicide because of serious mental health issues. So we'll talk about this later on. And the last one is limited facilities for individuals with special needs. For example, when we're talking about trans women, uh, we can see that public facilities are still uh, only recognizing two genders, two normative genders at this moment. But then again, when we're talking about transgender people, the facilities are not yet equipped with their needs. And we were talking about people with different abilities, disabled people. Uh, Facilities with these special needs are not yet accommodated by health authorities. So the pandemic has exacerbated the discrimination that vulnerable communities are facing. We can move on to the next slide, please. So what are the legal instruments for human rights protection in Indonesia? So before we talk specifically about the rights of vulnerable communities in accessing healthcare, we'll talk about their rights in general, in which their rights are protected under international convention and positive laws that are enacted in Indonesia. The first one, for the first one, I'll be speaking about International Covenant on Economic and Social Rights and International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Both conventions have been ratified under the laws number 11, 2005 and laws number 12, 2005. The next one is for children. We have Convention on the Rights of Children that has been ratified through Presidential Decree number 36, year 1990. And it is also manifested under the Child Protection Act in Indonesia. The next one is on Convention Against Children, Convention Against Torture. It has been ratified by Law Number 5, 1998, and Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination that has also been ratified under the Law Number 26, 29, year 1999, and Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women that has been ratified through Law Number 7, 1984. So when we're talking about the rights of vulnerable communities, their rights are guaranteed by our Constitution and international convention, as well as its derivatives. That's why it's very important for our government to protect the rights of every individual in Indonesia, and that includes the rights of vulnerable communities, because our legal instrument protects the rights of every individual within the territory of Indonesia. Next, please. So what are the state obligations in terms of providing healthcare for every individual in Indonesia? The first one, we're going to talk about the Indonesian Constitution, year 1945. It states that everyone has the right to live in physical and spiritual prosperity, to have a place to live, and to get a good and healthy living environment, and have the right to get health services. And the second one, it's on the law number 23, year 1992, concerning health. It states that everyone has the same rights in obtaining an optimal health degree. And the last one, we're going to talk about governance on economic, social, and cultural rights. it stipulates that everyone has the right to enjoy highest attainable attainment of physical and health mentally. Uh, Through these laws, uh, I believe that the state obligations are clear, that everyone within the territory of Indonesia has the right to healthcare, and the government must provide healthcare for every individual within the territory of Indonesia. That includes vulnerable communities who are often considered as different and excluded. Next, please. So, if we're looking at the general comment of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, number 14, the government must provide for major things in providing healthcare for every individual, especially vulnerable communities. The first one, there has to be an availability of services. It means that services for vulnerable communities must be available. And second one, services for vulnerable communities must be accessible. So every vulnerable group should have access to healthcare. And the third one, it has to have a good quality. And the last one, it should be equal to everyone. So if certain communities or groups have received certain kind of treatment, so another group should also receive the same treatment because it has to be equal. So that obligations are clear that everyone under Indonesian category, uh, everyone under Indonesian territory should have healthcare and should receive the best possible health treatment if they are contracted with COVID-19 virus. And that obligation should also set that obligate and the state has also the obligation to provide healthcare that is available, accessible, have good quality, and the services must be equal. I think that's all. We can move on to the next slide. So I'm going to give you three case studies. The first one, I'll be speaking about gender and sexual minorities. So for this category of group, we have seen an increase of gender-based violence against women, in which, in accordance to the National Commission of Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, Komnas Perempuan, we have seen an increase of up to 75% of gender-based violence due to lockdown. And we have seen also the rise uh, of tendency of suicide up to 12 times in the pandemic. And we have also seen the fact that more than 50% of trans women critically affected by the COVID-19. And we have also received many reports on increased stigma and discrimination against people with non-normative gender identity and sexual orientation. Next, please. So case study 2 will talk about indigenous community in Indonesia. The first one, we're going to talk about orang asli Papua or Papuan indigenous communities. They live on Lanijaya Mountains and the area of Tolikara, Yahukimo, Paniai, and Jayawijaya. They have limited health workers and facilities there. And with the population of over 200,000 individuals, there is only one hospital and limited doctors available. That is also hard to access by these communities living on mountains. And the last data that we have is that around 120 Papuans indigenous community have been tested positive with COVID-19, but there are only 75 ventilators available for Papua province. So there is a gap of health facilities in here compared to the populations in need of the facilities. Second one, we're going to talk about Orang Rimba in Jambi province. The population consists of around 200,000 individuals, and they live with limited legal identity because many of them are not yet registered with KTP or National Identity Card, and it causes barriers on accessing healthcare. This condition has been worsening because there is no health facilities in the middle of the jungle, and there is no health professionals who are on standby if they are faced with COVID-19 virus. And the third one is suku Urang Kaneke, or it is well known as Baduy ethnic. They are consisted of 220,000, 26,000 population, and they live with no medical facilities in the area of Suku Baduy Dalam. However, luckily, there is no COVID-19 case identified as of now. And uh, in the last case study, we're going to talk about asylum seekers and refugees. So there are currently 13,764 refugee populations in Indonesia living with limited rights to education, work, and other basic needs. And during COVID-19 pandemic, they are in the category of the most vulnerable groups to be infected because they are living in the area that is very dense. The high density of refugees and asylum seekers living in temporary shelters contributes to the vulnerability for these communities to be contracted with COVID-19 virus. And there is a lack of adequate medical equipment and sanitation within the shelters. And there is also a lack of legal instruments to protect their rights. Asylum seekers and refugees are also facing difficulties in accessing the territory of Indonesia due to heightened border security and travel restrictions. However, Indonesia has set an example on retrieving around 380 Rohingya refugees traveling with boats in Aceh. And asylum seekers and refugees are faced with increased xenophobic sentiments, in which I have received many reports that they are required to take PCR tests even if they are not, even if they do not have COVID-19 symptoms, and just simply because of they look like a foreigner. And I've also received many reports on deteriorating mental health condition amidst pandemic, and it causes increased suicide cases in Jakarta and Makassar area. The last one is that refugees who are tested positive of COVID-19, they are allowed on access of national health facilities in Jakarta, Medan, and Makassar, but they are referred to international organization with no clear standard of operational procedures in another places. So we can say that refugees who are living in Jakarta, Medan, and Makassar, they have more privileges because the governments in those cities are very supportive, and they are admitting refugees who are tested positive for COVID-19 in their hospital with free of charge, without discrimination, and they are receiving best treatment possible that are available in that area. But for another area or another cities, the SOPs are not yet clear. I think that's all for me. We can move on to the Q&A session later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Theo. That was very interesting. It's really important for us to understand who exactly we're talking about whenever we do refer to vulnerable communities. And I think your presentation had really given us an in-depth understanding of that. It's also quite alarming to note that certain statistics like violence and suicide rates within vulnerable communities have worsened amid the pandemic. It really goes to show that for many of us, the pandemic might only mean, working and studying from home or not being able to go to the mall. But for many others, it could, very well lead to life or death situations. So again, I will remind our participants that if you have any questions, you can submit them to our Q&A box and we'll answer them during the Q&A session. So let's move on now to our next speaker. Tamara, whenever you are ready.
Yes, would love to start out and share my screen.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dio. Dio, you gave such big picture of the law, the policy, and the systematic support and change that needs to happen. Whereas it served as a perfect getaway for me to talk about the practicality of it. So my name is Tamara. As you know, I work very closely with the people that I aim to serve, which is the refugee community, women group specifically. And I'm here to share to you mostly my learnings from my failures of what it's like to work with the refugee community, whether it involves my pride of thinking that I am the savior and I can bring whatever program that I have to the community and they will adopt it and they will change, to sometimes not being able to listen really well to what they are saying, thus providing the right solutions. So bear with me as I tell a couple of stories that I hope it will also enlighten you what it's like to work with these communities. So my title today is called Loving Our Neighbor. Why? Because these are our neighbors. We might think our neighbors are people who live close to our complex, those who we hang out with in the mall, or those who we invite to our dinner table. Whereas I would like to expand the word neighbor to what it is, to include marginalized people group. I'll start with the why. Who is my neighbor and why do I have to care about our neighbors? So the reason why I start Liberty Society as well is also what Martin Luther King Jr. said, which I will read to you. The first question which the priest and the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, referring to the man who fallen and is injured, what will happen to me? Not willing to help. So the person stopped but not helping and just walking again past the bridge. But the Good Samaritan here is portrayed as someone who helped the person who is sick and falling on the bridge ito. Reverse the question and say, if I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? So this is the main reason of what it looks like and what it is to embody this definition of what it's like to be a neighbor. To think about the well-being of others. And Gandhi liked to say, your well-being is connected to mine because your humanity is connected to my humanity. So that just expands to the reason why, regardless whether they come from different nationality, different religion, different family background, or even gender, or even belief system, it is our duty, first and foremost, as a human being to help them. So 3 points today. I'm not going to go in depth through the challenges of the pandemic, but the reality of what it's like to work with people group in the midst of a pandemic. The challenges for empowering vulnerable communities and also the solutions that might work. The reason I say that might work is because what I am trying to do in my community might not be the same key that you're using in your community. Firstly, ini aku mau highlight one reality of the people group that I work with. Often they live in tent without access to clean and proper water and electricity. Some of them are in street sites, or some of them have been generously been helped by INGOs. For my community, they do live in kos-kosan atau rental gitu ya. Tapi they still live based on the generosity of others, which is, it is very dehumanizing if you can't use your skills to create something in this world to make meaning out of your life. So can you imagine just being here 24/7? I think a lot of us here in the pandemic has felt what it's like. It's like prison. So the words that they would use to describe their life when I am building relationship with them is, I feel like I'm being treated as an animal, cuma dikasih makan, cuma tidur, and then that's it for the rest of the day. Sometimes they also say, I'm living like I am in slavery. And it's very rare that people use those words, living in Jakarta, and then they would be saying, I feel like I am living in slavery. This is what I do that I would like to share first so you guys get a context about my empowerment model.
Hello, I'm Mishka. I'm from Afghanistan. Yeah, my name is Mishka. So it's been almost 6 years that I am living in Indonesia.
Located in Cisarua, Bogor, our House of Freedom is comprised of women refugees from multiple war-torn countries in the Middle East region.
Yeah, it's been a long time without any activity, without any school school, no colleague, no school, no anything. Okay, being far from our country, being far from our people, so we are not happy, yeah? So we are not happy.
House of Freedom is a safe haven for these women who are disconnected from their home country.
We have here the opportunities, okay, to learn something. Okay. I'm thinking if I were in Afghanistan, okay, I would not, okay, even go outside to learn something, okay, yeah, because there we were not safe.
At this home, we envision these women to be able to cry and laugh, to create and dream, to feel safe, heard, and loved. In House of Freedom, our goal is to restore hope and dignity to women through skill building, employment opportunities, and a loving community. We train them with upskilling classes such as English, Bahasa, and tailoring workshops.
I'm students in here. I'm in art class, computer class, and also Bahasa.
Most importantly, we equip them to become independent, dignified, and holistic individuals by using their creativity and skills to handcraft each product with love. There is hope, and there is love in this home we are building.
Yes, those are the faces that I see in my work. You may be wondering, I would like to highlight the sentences that you've heard. Restoring purpose and dignity back to these people who oftentimes they don't feel heard growing up because of persecution and because of the systemic injustices that they experience. That's me with most of the people that I work with are older, 30, 40s, their mothers, their sisters, they have their wives. And I'd like to share a little bit about how it started. So it started with point zero, which is mapping out the needs of the community. I always call it asset-based community development, where I come to a community and then I do an offline LinkedIn survey of what are their skills, what are their perceived problem, and what are their perceived solution that they're willing to be a part of, rather than me coming to a community and saying, let's start this sewing training. I think it's gonna be great for your income. Second is I saw what are already existing providers out there. So this is when I realized in Bogor, now we've already have 3 centers, Bogor, Batam, dan Serpong. Yang di Bogor, it started because of a community that already has its existing base. It started with one person, my friend Kalsum, who already got resettled to Canada. And then she started this small community, yet because they don't have an Indonesian partner, they're not able to expand the business. So I come in as the business partner, and I now develop the training program as well, and also helping them with product development. The third is stakeholder mapping. Now that I see the big picture and also the reality of my community, who are the people in power that have the ability to take my community further out of the cycle of poverty and slavery, per se, of slavery, of education and poverty. And then it's very helpful then to not become the sole solution provider, but also reaching out to like Sandia Institute, UNHCR, or just want to be mindful of time, and GRS, Jesuit Refugees Services, to see where they can help in. For example, I work with NGOs that provides the English class or the financial literacy class, while I'm focusing only on the sewing and cutting classes. Lastly is developing the trust and partnership with those that we serve. This I will share a little bit more about how we can do that in the midst of the pandemic. As you all know, I think we've mentioned it really, really clearly in the beginning. Health and education is such a challenge, aggravated mental health, and thirdly is the limitation of interaction. Specifically, how do you build relationship and know what's happening with what they're thinking when everything is remote and virtual? This all begins again with the entire theme of changing the narrative. You seeing them not as people who is to be helped, but you are doing this together. You are literally just providing them with a bridge. It's not that they're lazy. It's not that they don't want to work for it. It's because they don't have that bridge, and you are just that bridge builder. They have the passion. They have the skills. What you're just doing is providing them with the tools they needed to be independent and thriving as a human being. So where we can work on and what are potential solutions that we can have and what might work for you is not having that savior mentality. It starts with the humility to adjust to where they're at, who grew up without a voice. I've run my business for 1.5 years and I thought that helping people is easy. It's not, because certain people groups that I work with that have been betrayed by their government, by extremist religious group, and probably by their own brotherhoods or some other countries, America or so forth, and some political tensions. It's not easy for them to trust, and oftentimes it shows in the work that we do together, because my help center, the people that I'm trying to help, is also my profit center, my production center. So not the savior mentality simply means that, okay, how can I listen to these people and give them a voice and making sure that they own what they're doing. Relationship is at its core. That means that oftentimes my goal of making a break-even point in 1 year is not always the case. Relationship means me stopping in the here. Tomorrow we cannot take the investment at the moment because we think making 100 t-shirts a day is not good for our mental health. Second is avoiding the charity mindset. I stress the point where we want to try to build purpose and dignity back, because it's such an integral part of the business. How can we make sure that they're also living into that mindset? What I mean is, I asked them one thing. We pay our makers 3 times the amount of we do for average minimum wage in Java. I told that to them, and they say, Tamara, you are looking to help our community. Why are you comparing us with the market? That kind of mindset shows a little bit of, you want to help us, then help us all the way. Which is, it's not the point of just handing them fish or money even. It's how can they take ownership. This is my job that I gotta be responsible in. And that's where you want to put a little bit of stick and carrot to get them outside of their comfort zone and make them that agent of change themselves. Risk management. So providing a close touch point. For example, you know that working with these groups, there's a huge dropout rate or inconsistency. One story is they say one maker, for example, can only make 1 t-shirt per day, where the rest can make 10 t-shirts a day. When I ask them what's wrong, they say, well, I have my family problem, I have my children problem in health, I can't put my children to school, I have a lot of stress. So in that sense, you also have to think about what community building activities can I build within my program so that we will minimize the risk of them dropping out due to social emotional instability. And then you gotta be realistic about it. I used to be too idealistic, where the funding you need to sustain the impact would probably just take a longer time than it would be if you're just working with people without PTSD to begin with. And then this also relates to the people that I work with. Mostly are, they haven't worked for a long time, so they don't know business processes. There's the business and social tension as a business owner and you wanting to jumpstart the social work. Vulnerability, right? I was very clear with my makers and my people that I work with. Hey, the business can only last for 3 months. If you're not gonna adjust to where we're at, it's also your loss. We are in this together, and if you're not working this together with us, then there's nothing we can do really further to help you with this. So one way that we try to do that is our makers always say, even though we already pay them 4 times more than normal people, and they always ask us more, we would do financial training. This is what we're doing. This is how we're pricing our product. This is the market competition. You can do this for charity, or you can do this for the financial reality that it is. To conclude, yes, I would be more happy to speak to you in a panel discussion and Q&A. Here are key takeaways. Sometimes the why is the most important thing, but it also matters the how, whether the how is being accepted by the community that you work with, and is it aligned with what you're listening, what you're seeing, your humility to learn and pivot according to how they like it to be. We started, of course, we were, okay, bikin 100 baju ya 1 minggu. Doesn't happen that way. We need to adjust also to their skill set and capacity. The when, it might also not be as we expected it would be. This is where your why needs to be very, very strong, because it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, definitely. It's not the very cool, hyped up startup reality. Oftentimes, it's a lot of heartache. It's a lot of miscommunication breakdown. It's a lot of cultural differences. and it's a lot of you having to adjust from your pride and how you want to do it. To be honest, for me, for example, you can it's easier, right, to do the easier thing. Oh, biasa aja kerja sama orang, kerja di Google, kerja di mana, rather than working with this community that oftentimes are unheard of. But I always say, I think it's worth it when you are doing it for the right thing, fighting against injustices. If there is one thing that I want you to take away is, what can you do that in your power? It starts with a listening ear. I'll end with this story. There's this friend of mine that I've known from Somalia. Her name is starts with the initial N. So I was so discouraged with my work because it's really, really hard. And then she got on a call with me. She said, Tamara, I know you've been busy, but I'd love to call you. She's a refugee herself. And then I said, okay, sure. What can she be wanting to talk to me and add value of, right? And then when she called me, she knew my goal. She asked me, what's your goal? I said, I want to empower 100 refugee community, women specifically. Then I think it was kind of a far-fetched goal, but one thing that she said was, hey, Tamara, you don't need to change 100 lives. You should just change one life. And you did that for me by being a listening ear to me when I needed them. And now she's a manager for one of my work, and she's providing about 300 people food every week to provide them as a safety net from starvation. So it starts with one small step, and I hope you can take that as well. If you want to know more about my work, feel free to check out my Medium or LinkedIn, where you follow my blog posts about the reality of sociopreneurship and being an entrepreneur itself. Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to chat next.
Thank you so much, Tamara. That was really interesting, especially because you were sharing with us firsthand experiences. I feel like you've really outlined the steps in which we can support vulnerable communities. And it was really interesting how you highlighted the first step, which is about changing our own narratives about what it means to help people. Now, because we have a number of questions directed to you, Tamara, like, I hope you don't mind that we just segue right in, because I think there are some people who are quite interested in what you've done. So there is a question here: who has asked, how did you conduct the assessment to understand the needs of the communities that you worked with?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. I would encourage you to look at just Google asset-based community development. You want to ask them a lot of questions about what are your strengths in this community, what are the weaknesses, what are the skill sets, and so forth. What I specifically did was launch out a talent skills mapping research. So just asking them their work experience, language skills, if they have certifications, what are their last studies, apa universitas statusnya itu apa, something like that. Jadi itu betul-betul very helpful for me to assess it. And even sometimes you also want to ask about more qualitative FGD about their situation here, because you also want to separate those who come to you because they see you as wanting your money versus those who actually want to take an agency of work. If I can do things earlier and sooner, it would have been to differentiate the two and not being too generous in apa aja semua orang bisa masuk.
Right. So hopefully that answered your question. There is another one who is asking how you've assessed the impact of the work that you've already done. The question also adds that this person thinks it's really cool work, that what you have done so far.
Thank you. Impact measurement, there's two different resources that I use. The first is SVUK, Social Value United Kingdom. They have a lot of ways that you can measure, and you can start learning and educating yourself there. Second is by RACE Singapore. RACE is a social impact ecosystem for social enterprise in Singapore, and they provide a lot of toolkit for you to use. So some of the things that we use, qualitative and quantitative, yeah. Quantitative, we of course measure the income increase, the percentage of income increase of productivity level, the number of products, the productivity hours even of the increase in per week, which is increased about 24 to 30 hours of their work week. Qualitatively, we use this something called social emotional research. Two things: there are savings and income goals survey. Second is social emotional support survey. So we roll it out every quarter. We ask them questions such as, how much more confident are you now? What's your sense of trust in the community? Um, how positive do you feel about the future? So from a scale from 1 to 5, and then they would answer it, and we would assess where would they move. We assess the change because it can be backward, it can be forward, depending on your program. But those have been very, very helpful impact assessment. It's this is also where I want to stress. Probably most times they don't read or write, and they may get, oh, why are they treating me like a project? They always send in the survey, which happened to us. So the best way that you can do is just doing informal research, just coming and building your trust and asking them firsthand. Because sometimes bahkan mereka pun juga malas gitu, nggak biasa buat baca, buat ngisi Google survey form. One last thing, I use Kobo Toolbox. You can open it offline even without internet if you're working with communities who are far away from internet.
Okay, that actually ties in really well to another question that somebody has, and this person is wondering how you engage and build trust with the refugee community in developing your business.
Yeah, I've been friends with them for 1.5 years before I started the business. Because I started as an activist. I would fight alongside Dio for policy change. I would be in the street fundraising somewhere with businesses and so forth, helping just distribute food. But these kind of people, they have a knack for understanding if you're sincere or not with your work, and if you just want to be there and listen to them. They would see that you have to spend time, and it's a sacrifice. Oftentimes, it requires you to just drive for 3 hours to the community and then spending time with them, even though you have a call with an investor and so forth. So it's really all these sacrifices. Where do you want to lay down your life for them and sacrifice to really just help be with the community? So the principle is living with the community instead of doing for the community.
Right, and it must be something that takes quite a process, yeah. So it just can't be instantaneous that you can get along with these people. So thank you for that question. Oh, there is actually another one who is interested in how you approach them. We know that we just hear them to, know what their needs are, to see what they need, but we also need to know about their culture. So how have you sent your messages?
That they will be partner for work?
Partner for works, yeah.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I had to create a commitment letter, literally something just in the written form. This is what we're about. If you join us, understand that if you choose to leave this organization, there's no point of returning for you. That's when they realize that those are forms that are easily given. Second is structural thing. A lot of my managers are refugees themselves. So they know very full well that they can be upskilled. I give them from the beginning, you are now seamstress, but let me develop you into procurement manager, product associate, purchasing, and even production manager and marketing team. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I think that covered it quite well. So maybe I'll start picking out some of the more general questions. Dio, if you'd like to join, feel free to jump in whenever for your own answers. Someone has asked, are there any support from the government for these communities? It's quite a broad address, so if you want to specify to which communities you're familiar with, feel free to do so. Dio is...
Hello, sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, are there any support from the government for these communities?
Yes, there are support from government for these communities, but the supports are not efficient. There are instances that we have seen in which the government is trying to reach out to these communities and providing them with certain facilities and medical support. But then again, it's not enough, given the fact that the population is very huge. It's over 200,000. But then again, the numbers of medical equipments and health professionals that are sent to these communities are still not proportionate compared to the numbers of the population. We have seen the example in in Papua. There are several doctors only who are on standby with the case of COVID-19 that is reaching more than 100. I think government has tried to approach them and to provide them with their basic needs, but then again, it's not enough. There has to be a huge improvement in terms of providing them with basic needs, especially in the situation of pandemic that we're facing right now.
Right. Thank you. Yes, that those were some very important points for us to remember. We have another question asking on refugees as well now. The question is wondering what both of you think about the mental distress that refugees have had throughout the pandemic, especially in regards to the fact that 2 refugees had ended their lives last week.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah, for that question. So my team is hugely affected by that, even though actually they live. So my center, sebelahnya itu IOM, which is the place that they had the suicide. So they are a part of my community group that we do ministry with, and he took his own life, right? There's another case before that was an accident. And then my team had to be dispatched to the ground to face about this issue. It's very difficult. They come to work, they say, Tamara, I can feel how they're feeling. I'm so affected, I cannot work. The best way that I can do it to encourage my team there is I ask them how they're doing, I give them a call. Secondly, tangibly is giving them an outlet. So I connect with Indonesian partner, like every of you guys here, and I ask them, hey, I want to do gift giving for refugees this December. Can you help join me? So I ask my community to be active in serving other people so that they don't be stuck in self-pity. And I also ask my community of Indonesians together and organizations to come in and say, hey, do you want to meet my refugee community and have a virtual party together? My cousin is here, her name is Jessie, and she did a virtual painting with the kids. That is one way, right, that you can actually prevent things like such as that from happening. And any one of us can just volunteer our time or resources a little bit, even it just means kasih kado Natal gitu, atau end of year gift to actually just make their day. And those kind of things actually, without you knowing it, those kind of interactions really just provide as an encouragement for them that someone cares.
Right. Very simple things that we can actually do in our own capacities. Do you want to add something, Dio?
Yes, Keisha. Maybe before I give an answer about this matter, I would like to emphasize that my answer is my personal view, and there is no correlation whatsoever between my personal view with the institution that I'm currently working with. This is a tragedy. I think it's also a systemic problem in which refugees are not fully paid attention to in terms of their well-being, mental well-being. I think all of the stakeholders involved in handling refugee issues should be focusing more on their mental health condition, especially during this pandemic, because this pandemic has triggered them mentally. And I believe that there is a strong correlation between pandemic, between lockdowns, and their mental health conditions that are currently deteriorating. And also, what we can do for now is to ask for our government to allow these refugees to be involved in productive activities, because the mental health problems are partly contributed by them not having productive activities, and the fact that their rights are limited in terms of education, work, and another sector as well. So it's very important for us to voice out our concern, to speak up to our government and tell them that we care about this community and we want a systemic change for them so that they can be fully recognized as a decent human being and to be involved in productive activities such as any educational activities or working in local markets, any activities that gives them dignity. I think it's very important for them to be recognized more as a human being and to be involved in those kind of activities.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Dio. We actually touched a lot about mental health, which is very important, just as important as physical health. There is a question as well about how the vaccination for COVID-19, a large percentage of the population won't be able to access it for free. And how do you think, we can help with the population that won't be able to access these vaccinations? I mean, healthcare already they're unable to access, but specifically in terms of the pandemic, what are the best things that we can do to help urge the government to take better action?
Yeah, I think I want to answer first. If we are seeing at the legal instruments on access to healthcare, it's clearly stated that everyone has the right to access healthcare, and within this context, I think everyone has the right to attend vaccination. However, we should prioritize the most vulnerable communities. And currently, I think that government is prioritizing to health professionals in terms of receiving vaccination. But probably after this, I would recommend the Indonesian government to focus more on vulnerable communities that are stated within our legal instrument, such as elderly population, LGBT communities, people living with pre-existing conditions. Those type of communities should be prioritized first, and it should be free for all of them. But for others, I think, legally speaking, it's their rights to receive vaccination for free. But then again, it depends on the government's budget. I think it should be proportionate and it should be fair. Thank you.
Right, that's very important points. Tamara, do you have anything to add for that?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So maybe this is something both of you could contribute to. Can you give some advice for young people who want to help vulnerable communities but don't actually know where to start? It can be kind of like a daunting thing, I guess, to want to start something new or something that you're not used to. Do you have any advice for that?
Dio has a background in rolling out organizations. I'll take my time to think on that.
Okay.
All right. I think Tamara, you're also very active and involved in volunteering activities. It's better. Okay. All right. I'll answer first.
Yes, please.
So, if you don't really have any idea on how to help the vulnerable communities, I think one of the most important thing is to get involved in existing organization and becoming a volunteer, because you learn a lot about the situation in the field and how to face them directly. And usually before you are deployed to the field, you'll receive some trainings and you'll be prepared for the programs that each organization has. And you learn a lot before you are deployed to the field. I think it's very important first to find your passion, the issue that you care about and you care the most. Focus on that and try to find organizations that are focusing on that issue. Try to reach out to them and be a volunteer, or offer yourself to help in any way you can. Uh, there are two platforms in here. First one is Sandia Institute, and second one is the platforms that Tamara has created, and one of them is the Liberty Society. I think these two platforms are very suitable for you to learn more about the vulnerable communities and why and how we should help them. And I think it's very important when Tamara mentioned that we should have a no savior mentality, because I think it's a very important mindset that we should have when we're helping them, because in this context we might seem to be helping them, but actually it's a mutually beneficial relationship, because through this experience you will learn a lot, which means that they are also helping you to learn. And at the same time, you're also able to help them with their basic needs. I think that's the kind of mentality that you need to have when you're entering the volunteering field, as Tamara has explained before. I think that's all from me.
Thanks, Leo. I agree completely that rather than you starting the wheel again from the beginning, just join in existing organization. There's so many NGOs right now who are struggling because of funding. You go to Kitabisa, you see a lot of them, they're all looking for funding. But for young people like us, right, I think funding is just the most limited thing that we have while we are trying to build a career. I feel that, especially working with these people, do you sometimes think that it's actually a sacrifice rather than working for a 2-digit company, earning 2-digit income. But that goes back again to the entire narrative, like your humanity is connected with mine, so I'm gonna forsake buying Starbucks this month to help a teacher who needs that 300,000 for who gets paid 30.000 di NTT per bulan ya. You nggak minum Starbucks sekali aja, you bisa bantuin mereka gitu. Just check out 30.000 Bukit. Yesterday I had a call with them bareng sama Putri di sini. But it first starts again with the eyes. What are you seeing? I always tell people, I don't know if you're religious or not. You open one religious book on your left, on your right hand, you open the newspaper. You see what's out there. You look at your window, you open, you're not secluded, and you listen to them. After you listen to them, you take a look at what's happening around you and what do they need. If you have the resources of time, give up your time. It may be just the most valuable thing because everyone else is trying to help. Then, oh, kamu mau ini, okay, gampang aja. Money is the most easy thing to help for me, or for a lot of people. The difficult thing is whether you want to spend dinner together with them and listening to them because they are lonely, specifically this pandemic. I am guilty, to be honest, of sharing more to the people that is more vulnerable than I do to then I be there for my own community, immediate community around me. But time is another thing that you can give. Second is just your knowledge. You might be a consultant here. You might have additional skills like painting, like my cousin who you can actually just work together with Dio or me. Would love to connect you guys with these communities as well. Thirdly, aku mau shameless plug, ada organisasi namanya Spark Indonesia, where you can actually get involved to a lot of organizations yang kemarin sharing at IDFS, and they are great youth organizations that are connected deeply with these vulnerable communities.
Right, thank you both, Dio and Tamara. It was very important to consider your own position before you partake in activities like this, right? Knowing exactly why you're doing it, because at the same time you also don't want to start helping communities and then feel as if it's a phase, or just a few months of doing this and feeling as if you've done enough or helped enough, but rather, reframing your entire what's it called, thought processes. So I think this one, both you, I think Tamara and Dio, have kind of touched on. What do you think were the most challenging experiences as you advocate for vulnerable communities? I know, Tamara, that you've mentioned quite a bit, especially on the mental or the emotional strain. But if there's anything else that you'd like to share, Dio as well, if from your own experiences.
Siapa dulu nih? People say ladies first, tapi mungkin aku boleh kasih men first lah ya.
Okay. Actually, every day is a challenging day. But then one of the hardest thing that I faced was when I was working in an environment that is so difficult to work with. I could not name the place specifically, but there was a resistance from certain communities at that time while we were trying to help. And we could not even deliver our programs because of these barriers, because of the mentality that is not respecting basic human rights. So I think in a hard environment, it could be mentally damaging for you because you are faced with a very serious situation, and in a situation that you could not do anything because of the decision that was taken by certain people that are not in accordance with human rights. And it's breaking your heart when you're seeing these vulnerable communities are at the expense of that mentality or that view. I would say that my work is very sensitive, and I could not name the place, the individuals, the institution, but I could share you this experience.
Yeah, for me, it's mental health. There's something called empathy fatigue. If you are in the social sphere, you would know what it is. Simply the fact that when you are being the emotional drain for someone to pour out all their emotions on you, and you get tired of hearing the same thing, and then you just end up taking that burden on your own shoulder. That's when a lot of boundaries needs to be in place, personal boundaries. And for me, that looks like not differentiating my work phone and my personal phone. Sometimes I do get calls, can you take me to the hospital? Or I don't have money, can you just send me money? Or I'm sick, can you help me please, sister? Which happens a lot with vulnerable communities once you become available to them as a friend. That is when you have to just be disciplined as a person of even fulfilling in your downtime when you're tired from work. You coming home, you make sure that you don't give your family breadcrumbs of your energy and not loving them as you should be. So how you actually do that is on the weekends, I don't work one day of the week, so that I know full well that even without me, the work doesn't rest on me. And that also influences when I work, I don't overwork and tend to think if a suicide happens, for instance, it's not because of me. If there is a family that got sick and don't have income, it's not because of me. Because it's easy to put your work, your social good deeds especially, to become part of your identity. And it's a lot of things that even Indonesians or community encourage kan, oh kamu kerja apa? Oh keren banget ya, social work, pasti kamu hatinya baik sekali gitu. But honestly, it's not about that, right, guys? We're not there for the affirmation, but it's just you gotta make sure you're doing it for the long run. And it's a marathon. It's you have to take care of yourself first.
A lot of emphasis on the mental strength that you have to take on, especially when doing these kinds of works. Yeah. There is a similar question, but I think it might be directed more to Dio. Someone had asked what the main challenges in reaching out to communities, aside from the lack of legal identity. So I'm guessing this person is asking about vulnerable communities that don't have a KTP or are not registered with the Indonesian government. So what are the challenges in reaching out to people like them?
Okay. The main challenge in reaching out to these communities is when we're trying to identify them because we don't have the data. We usually refer to the government's data. But in this context, we don't even have the data from the government because they are not even registered in the government public registry office in this book chapter. So when the problems, when we're faced with this type of problem, we usually go to the field. We identify them ourselves, and we listen to their concerns. We collect their data, and we create a research and conduct dissemination on that research, so we could raise awareness on the importance of protecting their rights and bringing them to the spotlight so that government could prioritize them. There is a constitutional court decision a few years back. They ruled in favor of indigenous communities to have a legal identity, even if they have administrative barriers. So as of now, it is the state obligation to provide them with national identity in any circumstances. But then again, there is a problem of reaching out to these communities because they live in remote areas and we don't have the logistics yet to address them. I've seen the example in Sangihe Island in North Sulawesi, in Papua, in Jambi with Suku Anak Dalam, or even not very far from our capital in Banten with the Urang Kanekes ethnics. Most of them they are not yet even registered yet. I think that's all the challenges that they are and we are facing as of now.
Right. Tamara, do you have, is that a challenge that applies to you as well and with the refugees that you work with? The lack of legal identity, is that something that you have to watch out for, or?
Yeah, I have multiple people on my bank account because they simply need the basic things such as when people transfer the money, where do they get it from? Or even sometimes it's mereka mau mulai e-commerce shop. They cannot have any identity to start that, even though they have the products even, and they're very bright. Some of these people that I work with are master's program in computer science. And they want to start something, but it's just that legal barrier access. There is an innovation that I recently heard of a startup that provides you with blockchain identity. It's implemented in the Europe right now, and it enables you to get aids from multiple government and so forth. I have to get back to you about what it's actually called, but it's a new rising startup that is actually solving this problem.
Very cool, very cool. There is a follow-up question for Tamara about how you spoke, how sometimes you have some people call you up telling you that they're sick or that they need money to be sent. The question is asking, how do you explain to them that, how do you make them understand to not do, or to refrain from doing certain things or approaching you in a certain way. Maybe they don't have any chance to work in that field, or are not able to access the partnership works that can promote their skills. So how do you deal with situations like that?
Right. Well, Bahar has been asking a lot of really good questions. It depends on who they are. If I know that they're kids, they're 10 years old, they keep asking for money, it's because they don't know any better. They grew up with that. I asked a good friend of mine, what should I do? I feel like they're taking advantage of me. They say, tell me what you're doing is a step closer towards mercy, and you know it's not going to be mismanaged, then do it. Other times when they are of working age, like you and me, they have something to work. I set them two prerequisite for them to receive the money, which we managed through actually a organization, church organizations, to give out these sponsorship per month. We ask them to be one, active in community, volunteering, getting in touch with their learning centers, teaching even the kids that are within their sphere of influence. Secondly, is we also ask for transparency and initiative for self-growth. What are you using the money for? And then also, what initiatives are you doing? Are you taking learning classes now? And so forth, to ensure that they are not taking it for granted.
Thank you. That's some very important things to remember, and to also deal with those situations very systematically, not to let the emotions get the best of you, I think. There is a question for Dio. And I think that this person wants to know a little bit more about your case study, the third one about Papua, I think. Maybe if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, this person is quite interested.
I don't know what to tell anymore. I think it's been explained clearly. Can you specify what kind of information that you like to know? But that's anonymous, right?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Maybe just
some
more summaries, or is this a recent case study that you were personally involved in, or is it one that you've studied over some time, or?
Well, actually, discrimination in Papua has been happening since decades ago, but we have seen an immersed development currently happening in Papua. It's a sign of good policy making from our central government. There have been a lot of improvements in Papua, but there are still problems that need to be resolved by Papuans and central government. I think it's very important for us to pay more attention on systematic racism that is currently happening in Papua in approaching Papuans and in developing the area, especially when they have been faced with decades of systemic racism. I think the central government has been very active in doing that, but we need more improvement, and we certainly need more transparency in terms of what have been done there, and how is the progress, and what are the challenges that need to be resolved together. I think we need to be more, the government needs to be more transparent on that, so that we can assess the needs comprehensively in Papua.
Right. Especially when you mentioned about transparency, sometimes you might find there's a bit of a media bias, especially in our local media, where we don't hear, as many human rights violations going on in Papua, unless it's something really big or something that's more sensational, I guess you could say. Do you have any advice, actually, just as me wondering how to access more reliable information about, how to stay updated with what's going on in Papua, especially because, we live in Indonesia, where it's like a very large archipelago, and we don't always have access to that information. Do you happen to know any other way that we can stay updated?
If the problem is on the limited data that we have right now, in terms of understanding what is currently happening in Papua. But then again, I think media in Indonesia, they are quite objective and the data are quite reliable. So we can rely on them for the data because we don't have our physical presence in Papua. So we don't really know what is currently happening in there. But the least thing that we can do is referring our research, our opinions to data that have been provided by reliable media. And I think we know it very well which media that we can trust to, which media that are objective, independent, and transparent. I think we can rely on the information provided by those media at this moment with this limited information that we have. But then again, in the long run, in the long run, we do expect more transparency on what is currently happening in Papua. And I think the Indonesian government has been doing a good job in trying to change that to make the situation better. I think there has been efforts by Indonesian government to provide better access of information to Papua as of now. But there are, things that must be improved.
Yes, yeah, of course. What about you, Tamara? Do you, like, maybe not in terms of Papua specifically, but in terms of refugee communities, how do you feel that Indonesian media, like, does it cover enough? Is it transparent enough about their situation? Is that something that you pay attention to as well?
Definitely, media inspires us, but the problem that I'm more concerned about is there is so many media. Of course, we all know the danger of a single story that we all hear about stereotyping a certain people group, but it's also social media activists. This is such a real problem, and I do that at the same time too. I post about it. Lihat UNHCR punya post. I posted about it in my own story, and then I forget to do something about it. This has everything to do with the way that we are wired, that we want to, I guess, please people and looking to be good instead of actually doing good itself to the people that we work with. Does it really matter when people see what we do to be good deeds? Do we have to post it on social media?
Right.
Posting a lot of things on social media actually detracts you from real time of serving these people that you work with. So again, even in that too, how can we set a discipline of limiting our screen time so that we learn one thing, put it in a book, go talk to people, do stuff. Don't be a people who think stuff, but do stuff. And that's something that I wish our generation would do a lot more of. It's being the people of their words, who say what they preach, which is after you listen to this webinar, mungkin ako bisa minta teman-teman di sini semuanya write one thing that you will do after this webinar to support and get to know these vulnerable communities. You heard everything from mental health to yang di Papua, mungkin bisa support fundraising in your own way. It's really amazing, I guess, when a collectivism, action, and power happens together. For us, it might look like raising 200 million for a Christmas campaign through Kita Bisa. Or it can just be making a really meaningful dinner with a community.
Right. Thank you for your thoughts on that as well. We have one more question that I think debunks some, what's it called? Concepts, where this question is asking, do signing petitions really help a cause? Is that an effective way to help? And well, I'm pretty sure you guys have already answered some more effective ways to help, but I think that's a interesting question: do signing petitions actually help the cause? Dio, Tamara, anyone to go first?
Yes, it does. It makes a huge difference because we're collectively advocating something to certain entities, and with massive supports that we have through petitions, our concerns will be heard more seriously by them. Throughout my 6 years of work in this field, petition has always been the core of our strategy in collecting supports from many individuals, entities, organizations, and so on and so forth. So it's very important, and it does make a huge difference.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to touch on the point of petition writings, media, words. I always, if you guys are in writing, poetry, arts, media, social media, there's such a power in writing stories for these communities and how that changes the people around you. Second, your writing actually translates to consumer behavior. So supporting brands, for example, fashion brands that are doing good to support these communities. That's the rise of social entrepreneurship. The reality of social entrepreneurship is only 90% of them fail, twice the rate of failure compared to normal businesses because it's very double-ended in its impact and its mission. So support these social enterprises as well. It starts with supporting small brands at the same time as you are petitioning to the government.
Okay, cool. So as we're running out of time, that will be the end of our Q&A session. I'd like to thank both Dio and Tamara for joining us today and for sharing with us such valuable experiences and information about the ways in which we can reach out to vulnerable communities and practice our own activism. Please be reminded to the participants that if you'd like to receive an e-certificate, kindly fill out the post-event survey that will be given to you after the webinar ends. I would say that that is actually all for today. Please don't forget to continue adhering to our health protocols, wash your hands, wear your masks, and maintain a physical distance. So that will be all for today, actually. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Keisha, for moderating. Thank you, Tamara.
Video.
Nice discussion.
Thank you, guys.